I think most woodworkers are interested in touring somebody else's shop, no matter where it is, what it is, no matter how fancy it is or how simple it is. And I'm here to introduce you to my shop because it's been an evolving process. Some of you will go back all the way to big shops where I worked from a castle, and you've seen me reduce and reduce in size until I've ended up with a garage. And how did I end up with a garage? Please come into my workshop and enjoy your visit. I'm going to walk you through it. You know, if you're a machine woodworker, your workbench is probably much less important to you than a hand toolist. A hand tool woodworker has to have a workbench. You just got to have a workbench. It's your hub to the main work that you do. It's where everything gets anchored, placed on, pulled on, pushed on, shoved on, and everything else. And it's also got the vise, which is your third hand, which we rely on constantly. So I started out with a pine bench just made from softwood, and then I made this one, which is a plywood workbench. It's exactly the same. It does the same as my softwood one. It's no better or worse than my softwood one. I just wanted to experiment with this and try it out for a few years. I really like it. It's become a good bench. So why do I have a well in here? Well, when you're working with a big piece of wood, you place it on the bench. If it's a flat top, you've got to move all the tools way out of the way. But for me, most of the tools, if I just do a little bit of placing, everything can go inside the well and I have a clear bench top all the way through. So I've got my massive vise. It's probably one of the biggest that you can get. It's a Woden, but it could be a record. There are lots of different makers, but the vintage ones seem to be the ones that hold up the best. And I love this one because even when it's fully extended, it doesn't rock around. It's solid. So I love that. And I also have my drawers on this side. I've got a catch-all drawer here, which somebody might look in there and say, whoa, that is such a jumble. But if I pulled the drawer all the way out and dumped it on the floor, it would probably take me a few months to put it back the way I have it, because this is perfect. Why is my vise way off the level with the apron? So when I open the vise like this, it's so that when I put a piece of wood, say I've got a big piece of wood and I put it in the vise and I'm clamping it here, I can hold the wood here, squeeze the trigger on the quick release and anchor it, and I've got firm grip on the wood. When I remove the same piece of wood, I've got somewhere to grip. I've got screws, I've got trays of screws. These are what people buy from the supermarket. But the screws are good, they're great screws, so I can use those, and I've got all the sizes I want. I don't need masses of boxes. I've got my small clamps, very short clamps under here. I've cut the long ones down. I find these the best clamps, really. They're great for what I do. Nice, lightweight, strong enough, and then I have my saws, my three main saws, 10-inch, 12-inch, and 14-inch. They're vintage ones. They don't have to be vintage ones. But they're convenient. They're so convenient. When you pull this off, you're ready to go. When you're finished with it, you slide it back on. It's done with. I put these rubberized mats down. I've got a concrete floor. If you've never dropped a number 4 plane that you've owned for years and smashed it into 2 pieces, you won't understand why. And I think this is so significant. We're always dropping something. You drop a chisel, you damage the edge. You won't do that if you've got rubberized mats on the floor usually, and it keeps the tools safe, and it's also more comfortable to walk on and to work on. You won't really hear me very much talk about machinery. I've lived and worked with machines all my life, but I also worked predominantly with hand tools. And so what I did a few years ago, I decided that it wasn't really practical in a garage space to have machinery, but it wasn't that. What I thought we were losing in woodworking was hand tool use. We were losing the exercise it gives you, the critical thinking that you needed, things like that. So what I did is I took all of the machines out of the shop for a period, And then I decided which ones I wanted back. And the only one I wanted back was this fella here. This is the Bandsaw. This is the only machine I use now. I don't use any other machines. No mortise machines, no power routers, nothing like that. I don't use those pieces of equipment. My bandsaw is, the table is now the same height as my workbench. I can spin it around. I can work in a different direction because I've got wheels on the bottom. So down here, I've got these cantilevered things where you press down, it lifts the bandsaw up off the floor, and I can move the bandsaw wherever I want to. I don't need a big bandsaw. This is a 16-inch. It does everything I need. It's got great height here, so I can cut up to 10 inches thick. So I've got this. It's a modern piece. I've got the all the bells and whistles on it for safety, so it covers everything I need, and it's a perfect. I've got a thermometer and a hydrometer there, so I can tell what the weather is changing, it's affecting my wood, things like that. So everything I need is on this. I've got this magnetic tape that I put together. It works for this. I've got magnetic on the side of my push stick, and that keeps everything located exactly where I need it. Sliding fence, all the rest of it, it works perfectly. So that's my bandsaw. It works in relation to the garage. It means that I can minimize the amount of power equipment I need. I don't need any more than a bandsaw. Everyone who knows me at all, anybody who's watched me on YouTube or on our woodworking masterclasses or elsewhere, they will be very familiar with the backdrop. Let me step aside. Which way? This way. Let's go here. I want to talk you through what I've got here because I've got various planes, different types of planes, and I've also got boxes and joints and different saws. I've got 5 mainstay router planes. These are basically my design. I came up with the design, added some features to some, and made some with different sizes. So I've got a little mini one here that I made out of a file. So I've got different ones that I've been experimenting with, and I make all of this stuff known when I've perfected any particular part of woodworking. When I've got it down, that's when I hand it over to you. So these planes, every one of them, all the stops and the adjusters and everything will be passed on to you. I've got my hand saws up there, the convenient ones. I only use 2 basically. I use a crosscut and a rip cut saw. So those are the 2 on the outside. I have a bow saw which I've made, which I did for masterclasses, and I do use that. The hacksaw I use, and then I've got a stiff broom that I don't use, but it looks nice, so I've got that there. In there, I've got different planes. Mostly, I've got 2 or 3 Veritas planes, 4 or 5 Veritas planes in there, which I bought, that I use periodically. But the reason I don't use fancy planes most of the time is because you actually rarely ever need them, and they're kind of a luxury tool. But I don't know, I can do everything with a number 5 and a number 4, so I have no reason to really use them. I've got a block plane here. You'll know that I don't use them very much. They're convenient for one-handed use. Boxes, I've got boxes that store my steel wool in. I've got boxes under here where I put my sandpaper, so it's already cut to length. I can fold it and get it out, and I can be working. I have this little rack here where I keep my mortise guides. If you know anything about me, you'll know I use a mortise guide to guarantee parallelity to the outside face of the pieces of wood. Special spoke shaves that I use, my bits for my brace, and then I've got all these different plough planes. I usually have 2 or 3 plough planes. Down below, I've got a couple of tool chests here, and inside here I've got a variety of different pieces, everything. It could be a star, it could be a Christmas card from my granddaughter, it could be anything. Those go in down there. I do use a drill driver like these. Any mate will do. I don't necessarily recommend DeWalt. They're just fine, they're inexpensive, and they work, so that's great. Now then, way behind here, let me dump these for a minute. I should mention this stool that I've got here as well. I've got another hand cranked buffing wheel, and this is just a cloth wheel. If I've got 5 planes and 20 chisels and scrapers, whatever else I've got to do, I can buff the steel on this and get the polish that I want very quickly. So I would, let me just grab a chisel. So I would hold this, have it the blade going onto the wheel, and then I would just polish it out here, and that will supercharge the polish on my cutting edge, give me a perfect sharp cutting edge. I don't have to do that. I can just use a strop, which I do as much as anything. So this is my backdrop. This is what you see. You'll see excesses of things, but that's usually because I'm experimenting with something. I'm trying to come up with a new idea, trying to develop my thoughts, and that's what I do all the time. I'm going to mention this stool because we call this a bench stool. You might call it a bar stool in your house, you might use it. But this was the original prototype of one of my early pieces that we did for masterclasses. So that's why this one's here. We're coming to the back corner of the workshop, and this is really still important. It's not back and out of the way. This is where I store many things. So this is a workstation that I built specifically for isolating sharpening away from my main bench. I will use the one on my main bench with my 3 stones, but here at the back, another experimentation. I'm using some shorter sharpening plates, and I just always have to do this experimentation to find out what works, because sometimes I'm recommending somebody buys a sharpening plate that might cost $100 and it's too prohibitive. I can find another plate that costs £10 or $10 and it works as well. Maybe it won't last as long. So I've been using these plates here. These have been imports that I brought in, and I've been using them for about 2 years, and they seem to be holding up just fine. So I take my chisels, I go over here. Now remember, I might have lots to do. I've got many, sometimes I'll sharpen 20 or 30 tools all at once. So I might come over here just to keep my bench clean. I'll go to the coarse fine, super fine, I'll go to the strop. So what's this abrasive paper? This is 150 grit, this is quite coarse. And I use this to take the bevel down in a heartbeat because I can refresh it. So I spring clamp on either side. When this gets worn, I just pull it on. It's inexpensive, it's just ordinary sandpaper, 150 grit sandpaper, but it keeps the bevel maintained, and I use that considerably when I've got a lot to do. So that's that one. And then in the corner I've got my, I've got my clamps. I forgot about my clamps. These are my long clamps. These are the ones that you probably won't see me use very often. Sometimes I'll take 2 long ones, split one off from the head and make it twice as long. So when I did a dining table recently, I did that with 2 of those, and that got me where I wanted to be. Bandsaw blades, great place to store my bandsaw blades. It's like handling a barracuda if you are not careful with them. So they're up out of the way, and that works. So this is my back corner. It's perfect. Straight edges way up here. Nostalgic pieces like this. This was where I made a walking cane for an elderly friend of mine who was 96, and when she died, she bequeathed the walking cane back to me. So that was a gift to her, and it came back to me as a gift. So things like that stay. I've got some additional saws. You accumulate these tools. You see them at a car boot sale or a flea market, and you see a saw that's selling for £7 that's really worth £100. You either bring them in and clean them up, give them away, and these probably will go to somebody one day. I've got a couple of rarities here. I've got a 16-inch Groves, which you don't see very many of. I very rarely have seen them, so I've kept that one as part of my Groves collection. So we're working around, we're at the far end now. This is really my main storage space. I've got pieces of wood stashed away in there, and I think many businesses would throw them, bin them, chuck them, or whatever, but I just can't give up on some of the pieces because they're so beautiful, and I will use them for small projects. So that's what I do. I've got some very nice figured pieces. Probably everything will pull out, but there, this is what I mean. I've got some some beautiful maple, some tiger stripe maple that I'll use on something for inlay. I could make a box from it. And then I've got more exotic pieces that I've picked up over the years. And a lot of this will come from an old piece of furniture that I've cut up. I've got pieces of wood like this. This is an old wardrobe. I'll use that for many things. I actually wrote about this to tell people where I discovered a certain way of doing sliding dovetails for some joinery. Short pieces get stacked and stowed. I've got these on a sloping background, same at the bottom. And then of course I've got my sycamore and my mesquite, which is going to be in my next project. I've got oak and beech and ash and cherry and walnut just leaning there, free to the open atmosphere in here, because this is what they'll get acclimatized to, and that will bring the moisture down to an acceptable level for a home. So what I want to do is keep it lower than it will be when it goes in a home, and a home is usually quite high in humidity. So that means everything will swell and not shrink. I'm trying to avoid any kind of shrinkage. This is it. This is really the end of my garage. This is my garage workspace, and I think this is just about the best thing. It's been an evolving thing. It's a place where I feel comfortable and I can make just about anything in it. So I love this workspace. It's perfect for me. Thinking back, you know, just walking around this small garage and explaining to you why I did it, I wanted it to be so inclusive that you would feel that you were in the garage with me. I remember having a workshop that was probably 30 times as big as this at one time, and there were more than me working there, but this has evolved into what I really want. And it's not an overnight thing. You don't have to have everything in place all at once. It's evolving by my humanity reaching for a knife, reaching for chisels, opening a drawer, going to my bandsaw to the bench to plane, things like that. What I want you to know is this is a very unique place, and this is a very creative space. And I wanted you to be involved in it. I wanted you to see what it really takes to work wood. And that's what I've done. I've worked wood here very successfully. This is all I need.